Well, I can honestly say that my experimentation with iodine is really proven to be successful insofar as how it has evolved into a very efficient methodology that takes care of all my needs. I need to undermine my prickish attitude that I've been for quite some time. I guess you could say it's born of a resentment as to problems that I was burdened with um, by other people's negligence. And so, be that as it may, it's my karma, you know. And, I was neglectful in two major areas in my past life, and so I was born with that karma immediately into this one. But the resentment also serves as motivation to not be satisfied until I find resolution, at least with these problems. There's always lots of problems we can tackle. Well, these problems have to do with health, this one in particular, and I've done a lot of different things, but what I'm doing now is so efficient, it's amazing. I have no need for bran anymore in my diet. I put the bran away in the closet. I'm a little constipated. It's a little bit of a strain on the toilet, but my poop is huge. I mean, with a little help from massaging the rectum and squatting on the toilet, it is huge. And I don't have this pent-up pressure and an inability to poop. It's just difficult. But I'm not incapacitated that I can't poop. That's a horrible a style of constipation. But this is milder. But the poops are huge. And that shows also that my colon is resolving its issue, and that is to relieve itself. And tiny little poops is hardly a relief. But what I've learned a few things. So I've doubled my dosage of digestive aid. So with every meal, I take one 25,000 IU international unit capsule of vitamin A. I believe it's retinol palmitate. So it's a vegetarian mixture. And 2 capsules of Thorne Research brand. Thorne is Thorne brand of digestive aid. I think it's called Biogest is the name of their formula, and it has ox bile in it. It has betaine hydrochloride, and it has something else from an ox, from a bull, an extract from a cow. So I'm hardly on a vegetarian diet, yet it does the job. 2 of them. One wasn't quite enough. And I do occasionally take an herbal remedy for pancreatic dysfunction, diabetes. What's it called? Gymnema sylvestre. It works pretty good. Sometimes I feel I have to take 2, but generally 1 a day. Anywho, so that's with a meal to help me digest, and then that effectively helps my bowels, because the less undigested food I have, the less constipation and gas and distress from toxins will arise. The other thing I did that really helped put things forward, and this I'm saving the best for last. This isn't not secondary, this is primary. This is more important than taking a digestive pill, or vitamin A for that matter. And that is a tiny little enema, a fleet enema size volume, 7.5 ounces of dilute Lugol solution in a base of distilled water, diluted in distilled water. Amazing. And to think if that did so much good, how much good if I did a full bag, an enema bag, 1 3/4 liter. Probably pretty good, but I'm waiting. And then I'll do the next size up, because it's amazing. My body wanted that fluid so badly that it wanted to retain it. It didn't want to expunge it. It did expunge some, but it retained a lot. It really was not only am I dehydrated, but it wanted that solution. Trust me, if the colon doesn't want what you have in the water, it'll want to get rid of it pretty fast. Or whatever you shoot up your rear end. It'll want to get rid of it pretty fast. But when it likes it, when it's nutritious and delicious from the colon standpoint, standpoint, it wants to retain it and absorb it, because that's what it's going to do. It absorbs water, so it's going to absorb whatever is dissolved in the water. And if you've got iodine dissolved in the water along with potassium iodide, then, why shouldn't it want to retain it? But I didn't know that it had a preference. I just thought it never likes anything shot up there, and that's why it just keeps wanting to go into cramp mode and want to get rid of it as fast as possible. Boy, was I mistaken. Not only did it want to retain it, but it has normalized bowel function so tremendously. It just blows me away, because the telltale sign is the size of the poop. When it's massive, and along with that feeling of relief, then you know your colon has really evacuated itself. It's really done its job. And it sounds silly to talk about this kind of thing, but there are 5 senses of action, along with 5 senses of reception. We know in the West about the 5 senses of reception, but we never think about the 5 senses of action. And they're tied to other areas of the body. For instance, digestion is tied to the feet, which ultimately ends up with our ability to think and work through problems. But then another sensory action is speech. And then another one is the breath, I believe, if I have that right. And then another sensory action is procreation, and then another one is elimination. And the one having to do with elimination is important. It's our ability to create poop. We incubate it inside ourselves, but, we form it, but we don't give birth to it until it's time to poop. And if we can't give birth, then it's like a mother, pregnant mother who can't give birth. That's it can be dangerous. And it is dangerous. My mother was losing her bowel function when she was suffering the tail end of her bout with Lou Gehrig's disease, and her colon was so blown up like a balloon it became perforated, and she ended up dying of sepsis. So, and she stunk like hell. My God, she smelled like a garbage can when she died. And I was sitting by her side, thinking, oh, she's finally fallen asleep, because her body was struggling, and she had really died. I didn't know she had died. I thought she fell asleep. Well, I was clueless. Didn't feel her spirit leave, nothing like that. I just, she finally fell asleep. Well, now I can relax. Oh, God. So I notice, how important I've seen, smelled, and have experienced directly the repercussions of a colon that doesn't work properly. So this is amazing that something like putting nascent iodine along with ionic iodide up the rear end, it's amazing what it does. You would think it would do something weird, right? But everything else we do is weird. Yet this is an ancient formula. This is ancient, By today's standards, anything more than a few months old is ancient, or a few weeks. This dates back, I believe it's 1813, when it was first discovered what iodine is, due to how to extract it from seaweed. So they had to extract it first, and then they quickly, within a year, I think it was 1812 or something, they figured out how to extract it, and then the following year they discovered the element itself, its qualities, it's violet and vaporous and whatnot. And, well, it's a solid, but it sublimates very readily into a vapor form directly, bypasses the liquid stage and goes directly to a vapor. It's very unstable. Anywho, so it's amazing. And then they came up with these formulas on how to dissolve it first in water and well, I don't know about first, but in an alcohol base versus also in a water base, and it's pretty much the same formula, it's just slightly different. You can get more concentrated in an alcohol base, but I don't need it more concentrated. I'm too busy diluting it, so water is fine. And my colon is happy. It responds so well. I'm truly impressed. I really am. I never thought an enema, a small enema, could be so effective. It boggles my brain. So, the reason why I'm not painting my toenails with strong iodine anymore isn't merely because it's an alcohol. That's partly true. See, alcohol is much more effective at being absorbed by the body and transposing the iodine into the body. Yet it's so effective, it's a little too effective for the purpose that I was putting it to. The ends of my toes, the last digit, was actually swollen. Every single one of them was swollen. So it was irritating. It was too much. Okay, a little bit, but irritation, and linger for days because it impregnated the last digit of each toe. So I thought, okay, there's something, I'm a little overdoing it here. It was, fun at first, but it's had its fling. I needed to find a methodology that I could keep up on a regular basis. There was a movie around 1980 when I came out of college and went back home to the parents. Cable was all the rage, cable TV, and so there was this movie on, I think it was British made, and the title literally was, "Can You Keep It Up for a Week?" And it was all about this guy. Somebody made a bet with his friends, his boyfriends, can you have a one-night stand on a constant basis for one whole week? And I think it was more than one woman per day. He was being burdened. It was quite a burden. And it was kind of a ridiculous, goofy movie, but that was the title, Can You Keep It Up for a Week? And it's so applicable in general as it is. It's very, very telling when we do health or spiritual practices or whatever. Can you keep it up? Is it cost effective? Is it convenient? Is it painless, relatively, tolerably painless? Not too uncomfortable. It shouldn't be uncomfortable at all, really, but, life is, generally speaking, a little bit uncomfortable as it is, so within the same ballpark of what we're accustomed to, tolerating, accepting what's acceptable. I strain at the computer when I'm working, right? So that's a certain amount of effort and strain and discomfort. So my bowels shouldn't be any worse than that. And that's about what this protocol is. It's less strenuous than the amount of work I put in front of the computer. And the benefit just keeps going. It's just, wow, this is like, when's it going to end? And I'll have to do another enema. It's amazing, because normally these things don't last. When you do an enema, it's like, okay, that didn't last long. You wish you could do it several times a day. I don't want to do it. Maybe if somebody does it to me, But it's just, then you wouldn't mess up your eating cycle if you kept doing that, because the whole system gets a little imbalanced. Digestive system, having water constantly shot up the rear end. So this is good. This works because it both purifies and nourishes the colon in a way that it wants to be nourished. Now, I know from what I've read more recently that Edgar Cayce is not a psychic at all. He didn't even know that he was being taken advantage of by his brother, along with his secretary. He did go to sleep, but he didn't come out with founts of wisdom, because he had no recollection. There was no independent witness. They were all part of the act. And what it really was, they were channeling, if we can call it that, because they're right next door to they're in Norfolk, Virginia, or Virginia Beach, or Virginia, Norfolk. Well, nearby is a military base, and they were being fed, and the CIA headquarters, and they were being fed information. So they were being used he was being used as a distribution center. But that's not to say that everything he said was a lie. We don't know. It's just questionable. Well, one of the things he came out with was this value of iodine at a time, oddly enough, when iodine was being ridiculed by the medical union. So maybe, there are stories that the government is split down, I don't know about the middle, but it's split into two camps that are a bit of a competitive struggle with each other. One that would like to look out for the betterment of mankind, while the other just wants to take advantage and of our ignorance and shortcomings and whatnot, and our weakness, because it has all the power. So it might have been a good act, and maybe that's why they went along with it, why his brother went along with it. Although somebody asked Maharishi if he got anything spiritual out of it, and Maharishi said no. So Probably because it wasn't spiritual. I never thought that one through. Because it was all a fake. He was just a patsy, a stooge. In a high place, in a high position of authority. But he did give advice about the value of iodine. And in general, it's not bad advice. The physiology responds very well, and it's just common knowledge. The thyroid needs iodine. Now we know the whole body needs it. It's just the thyroid needs it 40 times greater. But that's not to say the rest of the body doesn't need it. And who would know the colon could benefit and could need it to such a degree? Who would know? It's the last thing I would have dreamed of. Because we cringe at chlorine, if you're sensitive like I am. We cringe at the things that are not natural, and chlorine is not natural. Even though it's easy and convenient and cost-effective, doesn't mean it's natural necessarily. Oh well, sodium chloride is readily available, so why don't we just make chlorine out of it and sterilize our tap water? Problem is, chlorine competes with iodine. And we don't get any benefit out of chlorine. We get benefit out of chloride. But having too much chlorine or chloride doesn't matter. Either one will push iodine out of the body. So we have our own tug of war inside ourselves, in which we need chlorine and chloride, or we need chloride actually. We don't need chlorine. Physiology doesn't have any use for chlorine, but we do need chloride ion in the form of salt, because we do have to digest our food at the very least, as well as maintain the electrolytes in the bloodstream. Very important. But we also need iodine. So I take seaweed, which is, has iodine in very elevated amounts, but it also has chloride. So already there's a little competition there, you would think, although not really, because it's a plant, and so it's learned how to integrate. These two elements that are normally by themselves in isolation are competitive. See, that's the way science likes to think, isolation, but that's the wrong way to look at things. Well, if you want extra iodine in your diet, and then we got chlorine in our tap water, that's already a struggle right there. But for some reason, somehow, it's probably the matrix, the substrate of alginate substrate, the gummy, semi-solid substance that gives kelp its solidity. And they use stuff like that derived from seaweed as a culture medium in the laboratory when they want to cultivate various bacteria in a petri dish. They'll use agar usually as a substrate, and they might add other things to it, but they always have agar as a substrate. And agar comes from red algae. I believe it's sea dulse from the northern Pacific, like Nova Scotia. Algin could be used as another substrate, but I'm not sure if it's used in the laboratory for incubating bacteria. I know it's used as a substrate for other things at the very least. In any case, it's another seaweed extract or a derivative. And they're all kind of similar, and they're kind of gel-like. They're like a jelly, but they're vegan. They come from a plant. They're not jello from the hooves of animals. So where was I getting with this? So it's known that algin, though. So this is what algin is used for. It's used as a chelating agent to take heavy metals out of the body. So apparently algin is very good at integrating elements that if they were isolated, they'd be competitive, but because they're integrated into the substrate, they're not. Because it's kind of like a slow-release mechanism, is what it is. And I think that's why they don't compete with each other when it's in this simpatico relationship of being encased within a package we call seaweed. So Mother Nature solves these problems. An organic complex carbohydrate methodology, because that's what alginate is. It's a complex carbohydrate. It's not a starch, it's not a sugar, it's somewhere in between. And it's not cellulose either. So it's a different type of complex carbohydrate. At least we can... it's also not something we can digest, I don't think so. But it passes through the gut and has a lot of benefit in attracting and hooking onto heavy metals. And plus it releases all these other minerals that it grows with, that when we ingest as a slow release mechanism. So it's not bad. It's probably a pH buffer too at the same time. Anywho, be that as it may, So where was I going with all of this? Oh, I'm just so impressed. And I'm so enthusiastic. So no more painting toenails. No need for that. Because it all arises from the, or drops out of, descends from the colon. It's the colon where the yeast strands begin. And then they just go out, tunnel through the gut wall and go into the, create irritable, no, they create, what's it called? Oh, it's an allergy-like condition in which you become hypersensitive to things because of a microporation of the intestinal wall. And when I first heard about this around 1980, again, they didn't really know the cause. They just knew that was what was happening. Leaky gut syndrome. So you get large molecules, food molecules, that leak into the bloodstream from the intestinal tract, and it causes an autoimmune response. So you become sensitive to that food, even though you're not allergic to it. It's just you're getting it in your bloodstream when you're not supposed to. Well, it's because you've got perforation on the size of really tiny, microscopic size, but due to yeast, strands of yeast tunneling through the wall, creating that opening, and not just an opening, but a channel, a conduit. They become a conduit for these substances because they feed on them. And so they just liberate it from the gut, and it goes into the body, and then of course it would dirtify. I want to say dirtify, the opposite of cleanly. It would mess up the cleanliness of the blood and the whole tissue system, as it is, the lymphatic system for that matter, becomes ripe with candida because it's being fed all these sugars that it's not supposed to receive. It's supposed to be the sewage system of the cells of the body, and the cells of the body are not supposed to dump sugar. So where is it coming from? It's coming from the gut. Leaky gut syndrome. It's leaking into the lymphatic system from a leaky gut. Irrespective of whether or not the bloodstream has sugar and a high sugar content that it's not supposed to have. It's all about the value, because the lymphatic fluid is the liquid portion of the blood, so it's going to have some sugar content, but how much does it have? And if the gut is leaking any, it's going to have too much, just by that factor alone, contributing factor alone. Whether or not the cells are, the pancreas is doing its job of keeping things moderate, it may not be responding. Maybe its job is to respond, and maybe it responds in the opposite fashion. That would be pretty bad if it does that. I wonder. I don't know. I'm just speculating here. Sometimes our mistakes, our body and our mind goes in the direction opposite to the way it should be going in before it corrects itself, if it corrects itself at all. So it's amazing what iodine does, and it might be sealing up these holes, because it is an astringent action, iodine. It has a bit of an astringency to it, but it's more than that, of course. It raises the cellular consciousness so that cells wake up to do their job instead of being slack and slothful. And a colon that can operate efficiently, and an intestinal tract for that matter, it shows that my intestines are doing their job too. But I'm helping, taking digestive aid, but this enema really started the ball rolling. It was a big kick. I could feel the difference, because I had already been taking the digestive aid, 1 pill, not 2. And it was doing some good, but nothing like in addition to this contributing factor that really improved things even further. So it's a big deal. This is a big deal. And it's elemental. It has nothing to do with being a vegan or not a vegan. It crosses the barrier reef between the two because it transcends both. It's elemental. It's getting down to the atomic level of ions and nascent atoms that are not ionic, that are charged, nascent ions versus charged ions, let's put it that way. Nascent means, I think it implies without a charge, at least without an ionic charge. Anyway, so this is really fascinating, to put it mildly. Something so simple, it's truly amazing. I don't know what else to say. I'm repeating myself. Okay, I better shut off and go do something else. I might as well mention I take far less calcium supplementation than I used to. I only took it because I would always get cramps in my colon, and I don't seem to be getting those cramps anymore. I still take magnesium. I put magnesium carbonate in my bread recipe when I make bread leavened with Rochelle salt, a double acting 1 part baking soda, 3 parts cream of tartar. So I also put in extra carbonate in the form of magnesium carbonate. I don't put a whole lot, but I'm not, for the most part, I still take potassium iodide, I still take kelp capsules, but I don't seem to need to take calcium, and that's very interesting. It's I was only doing it for that one reason. I wasn't doing it because I thought I needed calcium necessarily, but it seemed to work. For years, it was the only cure or management protocol I could think of that I knew about that worked, that helped put off or subdue irritable bowel syndrome, basically. But it's amazing. This works even better. This iodine treatment is amazing. It just goes to show you that the cramping was due to the fact that my colon was not operating properly. It was like going in reverse at the same time as moving things forward, or preventing going forwards, cinching up, like tightening. Whatever it was doing was fighting itself, and that's why I would get the cramps. And so I couldn't pass gas. I have to pass gas because I produce gas all the time. So if I don't pass it, it hurts. And it was getting bottlenecked. The little gas bubbles were getting bottlenecked, and that would be where the cramping would arise from. So I guess you could say, in a way, I'm not producing that much gas, and that seems to be the case sometimes. It depends. It varies. But it's not intrinsic anymore, and I think that's the difference. In other words, it's not arising from the walls of the colon having poop residue, residual poop, stuck to the walls of the colon. And that's where the gas comes from, because it's old poop. It's not even recent poop. I think that's what's happened. For some reason, the colon has managed to divest itself of that sticky element of poop. And it always has reminded me of what something Charlie Lutz would say, the glamour of matter. It's sticky. It has a sticky quality, and it sticks to the individual. It sticks to the mind. It may be that this is a cleansing action in more ways than I had thought previously. It may be relieving the colon of that adherence of old poop so that it doesn't stay there. And thus, when the poop moves through the colon, it truly moves and doesn't leave something behind of itself, or as much, so that it's all moving instead of just a certain percentage of it, which might explain why the poops have been so big. My bowel, when I go to the bathroom, instead of just tiny, thin little things, it's like a wimpy colon. No more of that. It's a robust colon doing its job. Still a little bit on the hard side, but it's a vast improvement over what it was. So it shows that the colon is not dying on me. The colon has to be functional, and that's one of the side effects of the antifreeze poison, is my colon became shut down to a large degree. So it's actually waking up. That's a good sign. A very good sign. I don't know if you can see that clearly or not, but it's a shallow pool of water in my bathtub, cold water, in which it's lost some of its color. I had put in some iodine, Lugols, straight. I poured it in until it had a nice brown tint. Now it's a little yellow because I got in it and then took a sponge bath with a washcloth to cool off, to save me money so I don't have to run the AC. And it was very refreshing. and it left me, you know, nice and iodine smell all over my body. And I also dribbled a little of my dilute solution into my ears and to sterilize my ears, which is always a good idea. So now when I dilute, I use around 320 parts per million, which is roughly 16 drops per 2-ounce bottle of distilled water to dilute it down. Yeah, 64 would be for 8 ounces. Anyway, it's really cool. I'm really getting into this. I forgot to mention it's aromatherapy because I have mold in my bedroom and I've had trouble. I've been running the fan in my bathroom constantly to try to get fresh air into this apartment. But actually this is better because the iodine vapors going out into the airspace will help keep the mold spores from proliferating, and it might even sterilize them, the mold spores that are there. Who knows? I think it's a pretty cool idea.